Harrison Tower stood like a steel giant against the Chicago skyline, its windows reflecting the burnt orange sunset that painted the October evening. Inside, most offices had already emptied, leaving behind the soft hum of air conditioning and the occasional echo of footsteps in marble hallways. Natalie Foster pushed her maintenance cart into the supply closet on the 14th floor, her shoulders aching from 12 straight hours of putting out fires. 3 broken air conditioning units, a flooded bathroom on the 9th floor, and an electrical shortage that had half the building's east wing running on backup power. Her navy blue uniform clung to her back with dried sweat, and her dark hair had long ago escaped its ponytail. At 36, Natalie had spent the last 8 years keeping the Harrison Tower running smoothly. She knew every corner of this building, every temperamental pipe and faulty wire. What she didn't know was how to fix herself. The sanctuary of solitude, she stepped into the elevator bay, relieved to see the hallway completely deserted. The building felt peaceful at this hour, stripped of its daytime chaos. She pressed the call button and waited, rolling her neck to ease the tension that had settled there like a permanent resident. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Empty. Perfect, Natalie stepped inside and leaned against the back wall. Finally allowing herself to relax, she pulled out her phone and pressed the lobby button, then scrolled to her contacts. Her best friend Jessica had been texting all afternoon, asking about the dinner date Natalie was supposed to have tonight. The elevator began its descent. Natalie plugged in her earbuds and hit call. "Please tell me you went," Jessica answered immediately, her voice hopeful. Natalie closed her eyes. "I canceled." A long sigh came through the phone. "Nat, this is the 3rd time this month, I know." Natalie's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The kind of voice people use when confessing things they can barely admit to themselves. "I just couldn't do it, Jess. I sat in my car outside the restaurant for 20 minutes, and I just couldn't walk in." The confession no one was meant to hear. The elevator hummed steadily downward, floor numbers ticking away on the digital display. Natalie felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the one that came whenever she tried to explain why she kept pushing people away. "What scared you this time?" Jessica asked gently. "Tom seemed genuinely nice." "That's exactly the problem," Natalie said, her voice cracking slightly. "He is nice. And I keep thinking about what happens when nice isn't enough, when he realizes that I'm not like other women he's dated." She paused, gathering courage for words she had spoken out loud only once before. "Years ago. I'm 36 years old. And I've never been with anyone, Jess." "Not really. Not in the way that matters." The confession hung in the air of the small elevator car. Natalie rubbed her free hand across her face, feeling the weight of it. "I spent my 20s taking care of Mom after her stroke," she continued, the words tumbling out now like water through a broken dam. "Then I wasted 5 years with Ryan, who told me I was damaged goods because I wanted to wait, because I needed time. He made me feel like something was fundamentally wrong with me." Her voice grew smaller. "Maybe he was right. Maybe I am broken. I'm invisible to men unless they need something fixed. I watch everyone else understand the rules of dating and relationships, and I feel like I missed some crucial instruction manual." The weight of years, the elevator passed the 8th floor. Natalie's reflection stared back at her from the polished metal doors, a tired woman in a wrinkled uniform, carrying the weight of choices made and chances lost. "I don't want my first time to be with someone who sees me as a project," she whispered, "or a curiosity. Or worse, someone who pretends to care just to cross some finish line. I've waited this long because I wanted it to mean something, to be with someone who sees me as a whole person, not a puzzle to solve." 8, she laughed bitterly. "But maybe that's just a fairy tale, I tell myself. Maybe I waited too long, and now I'm just the weird maintenance lady who lives alone with her cat and her collection of self-help books." "You're not weird," Jessica said firmly. "You're cautious. There's a difference." "Cautious people have normal lives," Natalie replied. "I have a life built around avoiding vulnerability. I'm really good at fixing broken things, Jess. Except myself." The moment everything shatters, the elevator suddenly jerked hard. Natalie gasped, grabbing the handrail as the car shuddered to a complete stop. The lights flickered once, twice, then dimmed to emergency mode, casting everything in a pale amber glow. "Jess, I have to go." The elevator just stopped. She ended the call and immediately reached for her radio, muscle memory taking over. But before she could press the button, a voice spoke from the shadows behind her. A deep, calm, unmistakably male voice that made her blood run cold. "Are you all right, Miss Foster?" Natalie spun around so fast, her phone clattered to the floor. There, standing in the far corner of the elevator where the emergency lighting created a pocket of shadow, stood a man in an expensive charcoal suit. He held a leather briefcase and wore an expression of careful neutrality. Owen Mercer. The CEO of Mercer Innovations, the tech company that occupied 5 floors of the Harrison Tower. Her heart stopped, then started again at triple speed. He had been there the entire time. Every word. Every vulnerable confession. Every raw, humiliating detail of her pathetic romantic life. The blood drained from Natalie's face and rushed back in a burning wave that made her ears ring. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The space between them, maybe 8 feet, felt both too close and impossibly distant. Owen Mercer didn't smirk. He didn't look uncomfortable or mocking. He simply stood there, his gray eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her want to dissolve into the floor. "I apologize," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to startle you. I was reviewing documents in the corner when you entered. I should have made my presence known immediately." Natalie still couldn't speak. Her mind raced through the entire conversation she'd just had, trying to calculate exactly how much he'd heard. Everything. He'd heard everything. Owen set down his briefcase and took a careful step forward, his hands visible and open, like someone approaching a frightened animal. "For what it's worth," he said, his voice carrying a gentleness that somehow made everything worse, "you're not broken, and you're definitely not invisible." Natalie's hands trembled as she fumbled for her radio, desperate for something to do besides stand there drowning in her own humiliation. She clicked it on, forcing her voice into something resembling professionalism. "Control, this is Natalie Foster, Elevator 3. Car stopped between floors 12 and 13. 2 occupants. Requesting immediate assistance." The radio crackled with static before a weary voice responded. "Copy that, Natalie? We're dealing with the electrical issue on the east wing. Maintenance team is stretched thin. Estimate 30 to 40 minutes before we can get someone to you." 30 minutes. Trapped in an 8-byte metal box with the man who had just heard her pour out her soul like spilled wine? Understood, she managed. Then clipped the radio back to her belt. The silence that followed felt thick enough to touch. Natalie kept her eyes fixed on the elevator buttons, studying them as if they held the secrets of the universe. Anything to avoid looking at Owen Mercer. When pride becomes impossible, "I'm so sorry you had to hear all of that," Natalie finally whispered, her voice barely audible over the elevator's mechanical hum. "That was completely inappropriate and unprofessional, and I promise you it won't happen again." "Stop apologizing," Owen said quietly. She risked a glance at him. He had loosened his tie and was now sliding down the wall to sit on the floor, as casually as if he were settling into his office chair. The image was so unexpected that it momentarily distracted her from her mortification. "We're going to be here a while," he said, gesturing to the space across from him. "Might as well be comfortable." "I'm fine standing," Natalie replied automatically. "You're shaking." She looked down at her hands. He was right. They were trembling like leaves in a storm. She tried to still them, pressing them against her legs, but the movement only made it more obvious. With a defeated sigh, Natalie slid down the opposite wall, pulling her knees up and wrapping her arms around them. It was a defensive posture, she knew, but it was the best she could manage. At least sitting put them at equal eye level. The man behind the title Owen stretched his legs out in front of him, crossing them at the ankles. His Italian leather shoes probably cost more than Natalie's monthly rent. Yet somehow, sitting there on the elevator floor with his tie askew and exhaustion etched into the lines around his eyes, he looked almost human. "I saw you today," he said after a moment. "During the flooding incident on 9, Natalie's head snapped up. "You were there?" "Not physically. It triggered an alert on my phone." Security footage. He ran a hand through his dark hair, streaked with silver at the temples. You handled it well. Everyone else was panicking, but you stayed calm. Got the water shut off, redirected people around the affected area, had a solution in place before management even knew there was a problem. She didn't know what to say to that. Compliments from executives usually came with requests attached. That's just my job, she said carefully. It's more than that, Owen replied. I've been in this building for 6 years. I've watched a lot of people do their jobs. Very few do it with the kind of competence you show, or care. The unexpected praise made her uncomfortable. She pulled at a loose thread on her uniform pants, searching for safer ground. You mentioned your mother, Owen continued, his tone gentle. That she had a stroke. The stories we carried. Natalie hesitated. This wasn't how conversations with CEOs were supposed to go. They didn't sit on elevator floors asking about your life. They certainly didn't listen to your pathetic confessions and then act like you were worth talking to. But something about the confined space, the dim lighting, and the exhaustion they both carried made normal rules feel irrelevant. She had it when I was 23, Natalie said quietly. Massive stroke. Left side paralysis. She needed round-the-clock care, and my dad had already passed 2 years before that. It was just me. Owen nodded slowly, not interrupting. Everyone told me to put her in a facility, that I was too young to sacrifice my life like that. But she was my mother. She had sacrificed everything for me. How could I just warehouse her somewhere and visit on weekends? So you stayed, Owen said. Stayed. For 7 years, until she passed. Natalie's voice caught slightly. And by then, all my friends had moved on. They had careers, relationships, lives. I had experienced changing bedpans and fighting with insurance companies. She laughed bitterly. Then I met Ryan. He seemed patient at first, understanding, but eventually got frustrated that I wouldn't just sleep with him. Said I had issues. That I used my grief as an excuse to avoid real intimacy. The truth neither expected. He was wrong, Owen said simply. Natalie looked up at him, really looked at him for the first time. His gray eyes held no pity, no judgment. Just a quiet certainty that made her chest ache. You don't know that, she said. You don't know me. I know enough, Owen replied. He leaned his head back against the wall, staring at the emergency light above them. I know what it looks like when someone is broken, and that's not what I heard tonight. I heard someone who has been deeply hurt trying to protect herself from being hurt again. That's not weakness. That's survival. The words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples Natalie couldn't quite process. Your turn, she said suddenly, needing to shift the focus away from herself. You said you understood loneliness. What does a CEO with a corner office and a company full of people know about being alone? The cost of success. Owen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. For a moment, Natalie thought he might deflect, might retreat behind the professional masked men like him wore so well. But then his shoulders dropped, and something raw flickered across his face. I've been divorced for 3 years, he said. My wife left because I was never there. Not emotionally, anyway. I was building the company, chasing the next contract, the next innovation. I thought providing was the same as being present. He rubbed his thumb across his wedding ring finger, where a faint band of lighter skin still showed. She tried to tell me. For years, she tried, but I didn't listen until she packed her bags. He paused. By then, I had everything I thought I wanted. A successful company, financial security, respect in my industry. And I came home every night to a 4,000-square-foot condo that echoed with how empty it was. Natalie felt something shift in her perception of him. The untouchable CEO was dissolving, revealing someone who understood the particular ache of going through motions while feeling fundamentally disconnected. My younger brother struggled with addiction, Owen continued, his voice dropping. Pills, then alcohol. I threw money at the problem. Best rehab facilities, top therapists, but money can't fix someone who's drowning. He's been sober for 18 months now, but those years nearly destroyed our family. I'm sorry, Natalie said softly. So am I, Owen, met her eyes again. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something. From where I'm sitting, you look like someone who made sacrifices for people you loved, who protected her heart because it had been broken before. That's not defective. That's human. The space between strangers, the elevator gave a small shudder, as if considering movement, then settled back into stillness. The emergency light above them flickered but held steady. I was supposed to be at a dinner tonight, Owen said, checking his phone briefly before setting it aside. Potential investors. Very important people who expect me to perform like a trained SEAL, you should call them, Natalie said. Let them know you're stuck, he shrugged. They'll manage without me. Right now I'm more concerned about the woman sitting across from me who thinks she's invisible. Natalie felt heat rise to her cheeks again, but this time it wasn't entirely from embarrassment. There was something else there, something unfamiliar and dangerous. You don't have to be nice to me because you feel sorry for me, she said, trying to rebuild her walls. I'm not being nice, Owen replied firmly. Nice is a polite lie people tell to smooth over awkward situations. I'm being honest. There's a difference. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees, his expression serious. You asked why I was listening to your conversation earlier? The truth is, I wasn't trying to. I was in the corner reviewing contracts, barely paying attention to anything. But then you said something that made me stop. What? Natalie asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. You said you felt invisible unless people needed something from you. Owen's voice was quiet but intense. I understood that feeling completely. Do you know how many people look at me and only see what I can do for them? How many conversations I have where the person is just waiting for their chance to pitch me something, ask for something, take something? The recognition of kindred souls, Natalie found herself nodding slowly. She had never thought about it that way, but she recognized the truth in his words. Different circumstances, same isolation, Owen continued, playing the role everyone expects, smiling at functions, making small talk with people who only care about your net worth, going home alone and wondering if anyone would notice if you just disappeared. But you have employees, colleagues, Natalie said. Surely some of them are genuine. Maybe, Owen admitted, but there's always that question in the back of your mind. Would they still want to get coffee if I wasn't signing their paychecks? Would they still laugh at my jokes if I wasn't the one with the power? He looked at her directly, and Natalie saw something vulnerable in his expression that made her breath catch. That's why tonight matters, he said. You had no idea I was here. You weren't performing or trying to impress anyone. You were just being brutally, painfully honest about who you are and what you fear. Do you know how rare that is? Natalie felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back stubbornly. I didn't mean for anyone to hear that, she whispered. I know, Owen said gently, but I'm glad I did. Because it reminded me that there are still people in the world who feel things deeply, who haven't learned to armor themselves so completely that nothing gets through. The elevator shuddered again, more strongly this time. A mechanical grinding sound echoed above them. Sounds like they're working on getting us out, Natalie observed. Owen glanced up at the ceiling, then back at her. For a moment, something flickered across his face that looked almost like disappointment. I suppose we should stand, he said. Though neither of them moved, the moment stretched between them, fragile and strange. To people who should never have shared this space, this conversation, this unexpected honesty, and as the elevator lurched back to life, beginning its descent toward the lobby, Natalie realized something that terrified her more than any: confession. She didn't want this moment to end. The elevator jolted once more before smoothly resuming its descent. The emergency lights flickered off, replaced by the normal fluorescent glow that felt harsh after the amber softness they had grown accustomed to. Natalie and Owen both stood, brushing off their clothes in a synchronized movement that might have been funny under different circumstances. The floor numbers ticked downward. 11, 10, 9. Natalie's heart raced for entirely new reasons now. In less than a minute, those doors would open. She would step back into her regular life, and Owen Mercer would step back into his. This strange pocket of vulnerability they had shared would dissolve like morning mist, leaving behind only the awkward memory of things said that should have remained private. She straightened her uniform, acutely aware of every wrinkle and stain. Owen adjusted his tie, transforming back into the polished executive who graced magazine covers and boardroom presentations. 876. Thank you, Natalie said suddenly, the words escaping before she could reconsider them, for not making me feel worse than I already did. Owen turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. It wasn't pity or professional courtesy. It was something deeper, more complicated. Natalie, he said, using her first name for the first time. The sound of it in his voice did strange things to her pulse. Would you have coffee with me tomorrow? The invitation that changed everything. She stared at him, certain she had misheard. What coffee? He repeated. There's a place 2 blocks from here. Nothing fancy. They have terrible art on the walls, and the chairs don't match. 7 in the morning, before either of us starts our day, the elevator reached the lobby. The doors slid open with a cheerful chime that felt absurdly out of place. I don't understand, Natalie said, not moving. Why would you want to have coffee with me? Owen stepped forward, holding the door open with one hand. His gray eyes held hers steadily. 'Cause in 37 minutes, you were more real with me than most people have been in years. Because I want to know more about the woman who takes care of everyone else, but forgets to take care of herself. Because I think we both could use a friend who sees us instead of what we can do for them. He pulled a business card from his pocket and held it out. When Natalie didn't immediately take it, he gently placed it in her hand, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. No pressure, he said softly. If you don't show up, I'll understand. But I hope you do. Then he stepped out into the lobby, offered her one last genuine smile, and walked toward the main exit. Natalie stood frozen in the elevator doorway, watching him go, the business card warm in her palm. The doors tried to close. She stepped out at the last second, her mind spinning. The sleepless night. Natalie didn't sleep that night. She sat on her small apartment balcony, wrapped in a blanket, staring at Owen Mercer's business card like it might suddenly reveal hidden instructions. Her cat, an orange tabby named Toast, wound between her ankles, purring contentedly. At least someone in her life had uncomplicated feelings. What am I doing, Toast? She whispered. He's a CEO. I'm a maintenance supervisor. We exist in completely different universes, Toast meowed, which Natalie chose to interpret as encouragement. She picked up her phone and called Jessica. Despite the late hour, this better be good, Jessica answered groggily. He asked me to coffee. Silence. Then who asked you to coffee? Owen Mercer, the CEO whose company occupies half my building, the one who heard my entire humiliating confession in the elevator. Jessica was suddenly very awake. Back up. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out. Natalie told her everything. The stuck elevator, the conversation, the way Owen had looked at her when he said she wasn't invisible. By the time she finished, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Nat, Jessica said carefully, I've known you for 12 years. I've watched you turn down dates, avoid relationships, and build walls so high nobody could climb them. But I also know why you did it. You were protecting yourself from people who didn't deserve you. Your point? My point is that maybe this man is different. Maybe he sees what I see. Someone strong, capable, and worth knowing. Not as a project or a conquest, but as a person. Natalie closed her eyes. What if I go and it's awful? What if I'm awkward and boring and he realizes he made a mistake? Then at least you tried, Jessica replied. And that would be braver than you've been in a very long time. The coffee shop with mismatched chairs at 6:45 the next morning. Natalie stood outside Rosie's corner cafe, seriously considering turning around. She had changed clothes 4 times, finally settling on jeans and a simple blue sweater that Jessica had once said brought out her eyes. Her hair was down for once, falling in soft waves past her shoulders. Through the window, she could see Owen already seated at a corner table. He wore dark jeans and a gray Henley, looking nothing like the executive from last night. He was reading something on his phone, a cup of coffee steaming in front of him. Natalie took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The bell above chimed. Owen looked up immediately, and his entire face transformed when he saw her. Not the polite smile of professional courtesy, but genuine happiness that reached his eyes. "You came," he said. Standing as she approached. "I almost didn't," Natalie admitted. "I'm glad you did." He gestured to the chair across from him. "I ordered you a latte. I hope that's okay. If not, we can get you something else." Natalie sat, touched by the small gesture. "Latte is perfect." The conversation that built bridges. They talked for 2 hours. Not about work or weather or the safe topics strangers use to fill silence. They talked about real things. Owen asked about her mother, and Natalie found herself sharing memories she rarely spoke about. The way her mother used to sing while cooking. How she taught Natalie to fix things because, as she put it, a woman who can fix her own problems doesn't need to wait for someone else to do it. Owen told her about growing up with pressure to succeed, to carry on the family business his father had started, how he had learned to read balance sheets before he learned to read people. "I missed my brother's high school graduation because of a merger meeting," Owen said quietly. He never said anything, but I saw it in his eyes. That's when the drinking started, I think. When he realized I would always choose the company over him. "But you're here now," Natalie pointed out, trying to rebuild that relationship. "That counts for something, does it?" Owen's smile was sad. "I can't give him back those years. I can't undo the damage." "No," Natalie agreed. "But you can choose differently going forward. That's all any of us can do." The coffee shop filled with morning regulars. A woman with a laptop in the corner. An elderly couple sharing a muffin. A construction worker grabbing coffee to go. Normal people living normal lives. And somehow Natalie and Owen fit right into that scene. The pattern that formed coffee became a routine. Every morning at 7, they met at Rosie's. Sometimes they talked about deep things. Other times they debated ridiculous topics like whether cereal was a soup or if hot dogs qualified as sandwiches. Owen made her laugh with his surprisingly terrible puns. Natalie challenged his assumptions about how the world worked. On the 5th day, Owen asked, "What's something you've always wanted to do but never had the chance?" Natalie thought about it. Go to a bookstore and just browse for hours without worrying about the time. Buy books because I want them, not because they're on sale. 2 days later, Owen showed up at her apartment on Saturday morning. "Get dressed," he said when she answered the door in pajamas, looking confused. "Comfortable shoes? We're going on an adventure." He drove her to the largest independent bookstore in the city. 3 stories of floor-to-ceiling shelves and cozy reading nooks. At the entrance, he handed her an envelope. Inside was a gift card with no amount listed. "It's unlimited," Owen said before she could ask. "Buy every book that makes you pause. Every one that calls to you. Today is about filling your shelves with stories that matter to you." Natalie felt tears sting her eyes. "Owen, this is too much. It's not nearly enough," he replied softly. "But it's a start." The moment fear returned, they spent 4 hours in that bookstore. Natalie filled 3 bags with novels, poetry collections, and memoirs. Owen carried them without complaint, occasionally pulling books off shelves to show her, asking her opinion. Genuinely interested in her thoughts in the fiction section, surrounded by stories of other people's lives. Natalie suddenly felt the weight of reality crash back down. "Owen," she said quietly, "what are we doing?" He set down the book he was holding. "What do you mean?" "This," she gestured between them. "The coffee, today. All of it. I don't understand what this is or what you want from me." Owen was quiet for a moment, his expression serious. Then he stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. "I want to know you," he said simply. "I want to hear about your day and share mine. I want to make you laugh and watch you light up when you talk about things you love. I want to be someone you trust enough to be yourself around." "But why?" The question came out almost as a plea. "You could have anyone. Why would you choose someone like me?" The truth that Heel's Owen reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he gently took her hand. "Because you're not trying to be anyone but yourself," he said. "Because you care about people without expecting anything in return. Because when you smile, really smile, it feels like the first genuine thing I've seen in years." He paused, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. And because that night in the elevator, when you thought no one was listening, you showed me what courage looks like. Real courage. Not the kind that involves boardrooms and business deals. The kind that admits fear and keeps going anyway. Natalie's breath hitched. I'm terrified, she whispered. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of getting hurt again. Of not being enough. Owen's other hand came up to gently cup her face. Then we'll be terrified together. Because I'm scared too. Scared of messing this up. Scared of falling back into old patterns. Scared that I'll blink and you'll realize you deserve better. That's ridiculous, Natalie said, her voice shaky. You're successful, intelligent, kind, and lonely, Owen interrupted. So lonely that I didn't realize how empty my life had become until I heard someone else name the same emptiness I felt. You woke something up in me, Natalie. Something I thought I'd lost. The choice that changed to lives. They stood there in the middle of the bookstore, holding hands between shelves of romance novels and adventure stories, writing their own beginning. I need you to understand something, Natalie said, forcing herself to be brave. I'm not going to be easy. I have baggage and walls and parts of myself I don't know how to share yet. If you're looking for simple or uncomplicated, I'm not that person. Good, Owen replied, smiling. Because I'm complicated too. I work too much and forget to eat meals and have an unfortunate tendency to try to solve problems with money. I'm learning to be present, but I'm going to mess up. So we're both disasters, Natalie said, went corrected. The kind worth figuring out together. Natalie laughed, really laughed, and felt something inside her chest crack open. Not breaking, but blooming. Like a flower that had been waiting years for the right season. Okay, she said softly. Let's try this. Slowly, honestly. No pretending to be people we're not. Owen's smile could have lit the entire city. Slowly and honestly sounds perfect. 6 months later, Natalie stood in Owen's condo, which no longer echoed with emptiness. Her books lined shelves alongside his business journals. Toast had claimed the expensive leather couch as his own. Photos dotted the walls, moments captured over months of learning each other. Owen emerged from the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea, still wearing his work clothes, but with his tie already discarded. Rough day? Natalie asked. Long meeting with investors, he replied, settling beside her. But I left at 5. Told them we'd continue tomorrow. It was a small thing, but Natalie knew what it meant. Owen was learning to set boundaries, to prioritize presence over productivity. I'm proud of you, she said. He kissed her temple. I had a good teacher. He sat in comfortable silence. The kind that only comes when 2 people have learned they don't need to fill every moment with words. Outside, the city sparkled with evening lights. Natalie, Owen said after a while, remember that first night? In the elevator? How could I forget? She smiled. Most embarrassing moment of my life? Mine too, he admitted. Standing there, knowing I should say something, but terrified of making it worse. But you know what I think now? What? I think we both needed that moment. You needed someone to hear you and not run away. I needed to remember what it felt like to connect with another human being without pretense or performance. Natalie turned to face him fully. Over the past 6 months, they had taken things slowly. Coffee dates turned into dinners. Dinners turned into movies and museum visits. They had held hands, shared first kisses, built trust in increments that honored both their fears. But tonight, looking at this man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and chosen to stay, who had shared his own brokenness without shame, who made her laugh and challenged her and showed up every single day, Natalie felt something shift. The beginning of everything, Owen, she said quietly. I'm ready. He understood immediately. His hand found hers, squeezing gently. Are you sure? There's no rush. We have all the time in the world, I'm sure Natalie replied. Because this isn't about checking off some box or proving something. It's about choosing to be vulnerable with someone I trust completely. Someone who sees all of me and doesn't look away. Owen's eyes glistened. I love you, he said, the words simple and true. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you looked at me in that elevator with terror and honesty in your eyes." "I love you too," Natalie whispered. "Even though you make terrible puns and work too much, and once tried to fix my dishwasher with duct tape." They both laughed, the sound filling the space that used to feel so empty. What happened that night was private, sacred, theirs alone. But what mattered most wasn't the physical intimacy they shared. It was the emotional safety they had built together. The knowledge that they could be imperfect, scared, and beautifully human with each other the morning after Natalie woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and Owen's arm around her waist. For a moment, panic threatened. All the old fears tried to surface. Then Owen stirred, pressing a sleepy kiss to her shoulder. "Good morning," he murmured. "Good morning," she replied. "How are you feeling?" It was such a simple question, but it held everything. He wasn't assuming. He was asking, giving her space to be honest. "Happy," Natalie said, and meant it. "Scared, grateful, all of it at once." "That sounds about right," Owen agreed, pulling her closer. "Want to talk about it over breakfast? I make excellent scrambled eggs. And by excellent, I mean edible." Natalie laughed and turned to face him. His hair was messed up, his eyes still heavy with sleep, and he looked absolutely perfect in his imperfection. "You know what that night in the elevator taught me?" she said. "What?" "That sometimes the moment that breaks you open is the same moment that lets the light in. I spent so many years protecting myself, keeping everyone at a distance. But that confession I never meant anyone to hear, it brought me to you." Owen smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Funny how life works. I cleared my entire schedule that day after we got out. Canceled everything. My assistant thought I'd lost my mind. Why? Because I realized that I'd spent years filling my calendar with meetings and obligations. Thinking that's what success looked like. But in 37 minutes in a broken elevator, I felt more alive than I had in a decade. I knew I needed to figure out why. The gift of being seen, they made breakfast together in Owen's kitchen, moving around each other with the easy comfort of people learning each other's rhythms. Toast supervised from his perch on the counter, occasionally meowing his approval or discontent. "I've been thinking," Owen said as he plated the eggs. "The company is stable. I have an excellent management team. What if I stepped back a bit? Not retired, but maybe stopped trying to control every single detail." Natalie looked at him in surprise. "Are you sure? That company is your life's work." "It was," Owen corrected. "But I'm starting to realize that a life's work should probably include actually living. I want time for us. For the bookstore trips and the terrible movies you insist on watching. For lazy Sunday mornings and spontaneous adventures." He set the plates down and took her hands. "You taught me that success isn't about how much you achieve. It's about who you become and who you choose to become it with." Natalie felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were happy tears. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from the best," Owen replied. "A woman who spent years caring for others and somehow never lost her capacity for hope, who faced her fears even when it terrified her, who chose vulnerability over safety." The truth about fairy tales as they sat down to eat. Natalie thought about all the fairy tales she'd read as a child. Stories where the princess waited for rescue, where true love solved everything instantly, where happy endings came effortlessly. This wasn't that kind of story. She and Owen both came with scars and struggles. They would have difficult days. They would mess up and have to apologize. They would have to keep choosing each other over and over, even when it wasn't easy. But somehow, that made it more real, more valuable, more theirs. "What are you thinking about?" Owen asked, watching her with those gray eyes that had learned to see her completely. "I'm thinking that this is better than any fairy tale," Natalie said. "Because it's real. Because we're real. Broken and healing and figuring it out together." Owen raised his coffee mug. "To being real," Natalie clinked her mug against his. "To being seen, 37 minutes that changed everything," Owen added. They drank their coffee and ate their slightly overdone scrambled eggs, and planned a day with no agenda beyond being together. And in the morning light of Owen's condo that no longer felt empty, Two people who had been invisible to the world finally saw each other clearly. Sometimes the moment that exposes you completely is the same moment that sets you free. Sometimes the confession you never meant to make becomes the bridge to the life you never thought you'd have. And sometimes, love doesn't arrive like a lightning bolt. It arrives like dawn, gradually, gently, illuminating all the places you thought were too dark to ever be seen. This was just the beginning. But it was theirs, and that made it perfect. The end.